Welcome back to Data Reality Check, where data meets the real world. This is the podcast where we talk about why organizations can have more data than ever, more dashboards than ever, and still struggle to make better decisions. Today's episode is about a gap I see constantly. Companies invest heavily in collecting and storing data in platforms. They build dashboards, reports, metrics, and yet the insight remains scarce. So today's question is, why do companies have lots of data, but so little insights? To explore this, I'm joined by someone who has spent decades focusing on many organizations, helping them to understand why quality is important. And the people, of course, who rely on data to do their jobs. I'm really happy to welcome Tom Redman, aka the Data Doc. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm really happy to have you here. He's the president of Data Quality Solutions and widely known for his work on data quality and data management. And he has spent years and years advising organizations on how to improve the reliability, usefulness of their data, while, of course, reminding them that people first is one of the pillars to have good data and good quality. Welcome, Tom.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Amy.
Thanks a lot. I want to start with one topic here that sounds almost paradoxical. So, organizations have more data than ever, yet the decision of quality often hasn't improved, right? The quality is still bad. They are still having the same complaints from the business sides at the same pace. So, from your experience, why does this happen so consistently and even the year passes and it's still being a big problem?
Yeah, let me make a couple of remarks on that. I find that almost everything we do in the data space is backwards. We start with data and then go through customer and to business, as opposed to starting with customer and working backwards and saying, okay, what is this customer trying to do? What do they need to do this? If they're conducting an operation, what data they need about operations? If it's making a decision, what's the full suite of data that they need to make that decision, and then working backwards and finding that data and trying to bring that data, to organize it and bring it to bear in a way that the decision maker or the person conducting the operation, from that matter, could really use. And so if you start with customers, you find out that they need only a small subset of what we're collecting when we go in that direction. And so, that going in the wrong direction, it's almost inevitable that you will put in everything that you can possibly acquire without focus on the stuff that's really, really most important.
Yeah, I truly believe on that as well. I mentioned it quite a bit in my book because I was a technical person and I transitioned to do more business driven stuff for the same reason, because I feel there is such a big bridge, right, between the data people and the business people. They don't talk. It's like they are enemies. They fight for the most silly things, like, oh yeah, you don't know how to do my dashboard. I don't like the quality, but they never provided the right requirements, or no one collected the requirements. So the data engineer or the data analyst come and they create whatever they thought it made sense. And then it's this eternal fight between business and tech that seems like never ends.
Yeah, well, look, first of all, I want to point out that it's really, really hard to be a good customer. Okay. And a lot of data people come and say, okay, tell me what data you need. Right. And I said, well, just think about it. It's like, what data do I really need? Like, it's a really hard and abstract question. Right. A sort of better way to approach this. And I mean, maybe this is, a little bit metaphorical, but suppose you could follow a decision maker around for, at least a day and find out what they do, right? So who they're talking to, what kind of decisions they actually have to make, what they like and they don't like, right? And then you could, opine, oh, I see. These are the kinds of decisions you're making. And there can be a back and forth to say, yeah, those are the kinds of decisions I'm making. Okay, like, well, what would actually help in there? So, well, I'm trying to make this decision about who to hire. Okay. And what I really like is, yeah, I don't know. I'd really like to know whether I can trust this person or not. So, okay, well, I don't know. That's probably, too much to ask. So now we get into a bunch of surrogates like, where did they go to school and what was their grade point? And we try to fill gaps with lots and lots of stuff rather than, not simply acknowledging the most important stuff may be hard to get. And and I really want to build on this. Things are too black and white between customers and creators or providers, right? It is really, really hard to know what you want. And I find then that like people who build dashboards, they fall into the trap of saying, okay, well, I don't know really what they want. So I'll build a dashboard that will answer every possible question, right? And I sometimes I tell the distinction between a shotgun and a high powered rifle, right? And a shotgun sort of low power, high dispersion, right? If you may hit something with it and so forth, as opposed to the high powered rifle, which is very, very narrow dispersion, right? Very, very targeted. If you hit something, you're going to kill it, kind of thing. And so, what I find that most business people really need is they need a high powered rifle associated with very, very specific problems. Okay. And they may have, two or three kind of very, very specific problems. It's not like they just need one rifle. They need, they need a variety of rifles. But what they decidedly don't need is the shotgun. And absent really understanding those specific problems, right? Those building dashboards and so forth, opt for shotguns, and then nobody's happy, kind of thing. And it's easy to then also, the blame game. Well, you didn't tell me what you needed, and the pushback, of course, was, yeah, I didn't really know, and you didn't help me articulate that. So I don't know. I mean, do you see the same kinds of things, right? Business people actually, many of them want help, but what they don't want is they don't want people telling them about their business who've never served a day in it, and they don't want partial solutions, right? They want specific answers to specific problems. And by the way, this is part of what we get into when we talk about, quality. There's a lot of definitions of quality, but one of mine is it is meeting specific needs of specific customers.
Yeah, I completely agree on that actually. And there is a big confusion, as you mentioned, about having just data in general, right? Or enabling an insight with certain data that you can use. And that's something as well that I do often is sit with the person and ask them what kind of problems you want to solve, right? It's more like, okay, what is a pain point for you? And then we can talk about like the data type that you need or where we can find it or what exactly we want to solve. And that's what you said about having these different rifles, right? Because it could be for one specific problem is something, for another one is another one. And it's not necessarily that you need, as you said, the fancy dashboard with I don't know how many different type of charts that at the end won't bring anything.
Let's go outside of data for an example. So one of my favorite is if you ask somebody what they want their automobile windshield, to do, they can't say, well, I need it to be 3/8 of an inch thick with a 17 degree, sort of curvature on the edges, and a tint to block out the sunlight, kind of thing. What they can say is, well, uh, I use my car at all kinds of times and conditions, right? I need it to block the sun when I'm going straight into the sun. Oh, if I get behind a truck and the truck throws up some gravel, I need it to not crack when it's hit with gravel, kind of thing. I need a shade around it. They talk about what they want the windshield to do rather than the technical characteristics of the windshield. And so, and nobody who designs, windshields would go out and ask an ordinary driver about the technical aspects of the windshield. Yet we in data do that all the time, right? Rather than, "Well, what do you want this to do?" Well, I want it to help me answer these kind of questions. um, we get into the technical aspects of it way too soon, and frankly, they're not interested in the technical
Mm.
aspects. That's the data person's job to figure out.
Yeah, yeah. And what role does data quality play in creating this illusion of insight without the reality of better decisions, right? Because of course, with bad data, you will get bad information that might not help you to make better decisions. But what's the role here of data quality?
Well, so look, I think that there's a lot going on. I frankly, I think most people, they self-style themselves as pretty good decision makers, and they've been around the block before. Mostly they've seen situations. This particular situation is not that different than a particular situation that they saw before. Mostly, like I'm guilty of this. I'm sure, like everyone else, I remember the times I had a brilliant insight, and I forget the times that that I missed. And so I think that the thing that is really key is this is a very probabilistic thing, right? And we have to recognize that there are things that are hard data that we can actually, write down on a piece of paper or in a computer file and see. And then there are soft data, and soft data are our values and our experiences and the things that are hard to codify. And what good decision makers are doing is they're trying to balance these things, right? The things that are in their head automatically are trusted. The new things that are coming in, they don't know whether to trust those things or not, right? Many of them are looking for a reason not to trust those things. Others are looking for a reason to trust those things, and especially is when good is when the data is challenging their internal assumptions. The internal assumptions are challenging the data, and they can find common ground among the two, and make some sensible, decisions. Okay, well, I'm not going to include that. It's not quite relevant here, right? This other thing kind of bothers me. Ah, this is an important decision. Rather than make it today, I'm going to see if I can, talk to somebody else about a third thing. And so I guess it's sort of trite to say that data are no better than, excuse me, decisions are no better than the data on which they're based, right? I mean, but it's much more complex, right? There's many more things going on than just that. A final thing we got to keep in mind is all important decisions are made in the face of uncertainty, and they are all made with political complications involved. Okay. Well, how am I going to look for the boss? Will I be able to sell this decision? This is something else we don't talk enough about, but, like a great decision that your organization can't actually execute on is not a great decision. It's, like organizational capabilities to execute filter largely in large ways, in ways we don't fully understand into decision makers' minds. Okay. And so, like in data quality, we have to be very have a very wide lens in terms of the way we're thinking about decision makers and decision making groups, and how we are guiding them along.
Yeah. What do you think is so hard to get into the heads of the C levels or the heads to invest in data quality? Because you and me, we know this is important. You've been preaching this for years, and actually, part of my career, I work as a data quality engineer for a long time, and I understand the importance of this, right? But to communicate this for them is, oh yeah, investing in this is money, is time, is not worth it. You have seen probably everything. I would like to know more. Why is this so complicated, and why is so negative to so many data organizations?
Look, again, I think there's a lot going on, and I don't I there's a I guess it's a Russian, surely maybe it's Tolstoy, who made the observation that all good families are pretty much the same, and all dysfunctional ones are dysfunctional in their own way. And I look, I think the same thing applies to data quality, right? And so everybody who's getting somewhere with it, they put customers first, right? They have a way of, customers have responsibilities too. They recognize that creating data correctly the first time is a good thing to do. They recognize that it's most data doesn't matter, it's never used, and so they have a way of connecting creators and customers and focusing on the stuff that's most important. I mean, and that's like pretty obvious stuff, kind of thing, right? If you've come up the chain now, and well, what have you seen of data quality, and what might have gotten you rewarded? And surely you ran into data quality problems, but probably you got rewarded for thinking of some clever workaround to deal with the data quality problems, right? So maybe maybe you figured out an alternative source or something that when you work in operations, the addresses coming in from sales weren't very good, so we did this instead, kind of thing, right? Rather than we're reaching back and connecting with sales and sort of finding and eliminating the root cause, and so so that's one thing, is that people on their way up, they got rewarded for the wrong things when it comes to data quality. The second thing is this whole business of getting people to act like customers and creators and connecting them. I mean, that is a paradigm shift, right? And you as a leader have to ask yourself the questions that do I understand this paradigm shift well enough? Do I have the skills to lead change? Right? It's probably going to take a couple of years. Am I going to be around long enough to to get the benefits of that? Or should I do something that's more cosmetic, that that looks better and gets me my next promotion faster? Okay. And I hope I don't sound cynical about this, right? But well, I don't know. Every leader I talk to recognizes that data quality is an issue. Now, some see it as a bigger issue than others do, right? But what they don't see is what they personally can do about it. Okay. And, maybe they've never experienced the beauty of customers and creators and continuous improvement, or maybe, they just see this as something that, oh, yeah, if I get into this and I don't succeed, it's going to look bad. Right. I mean, there's just a whole variety of factors like this. One thing that is absolutely clear, by the way, is the business case. And if you choose to look, right? So, if you choose to look, you find these enormous hidden data factories around companies where, some group is cleaning up the crap that some other group made, just so they can, they can do their job. And so I don't know. I guess this is my best answer is that people are aware it's a problem. What they're stuck on is knowing what to do about it and or having the courage to take those steps.
Actually, something that you said, I even wrote it. It was data quality gets us a reward. I mean, at the end, is you get a reward for fixing it. And that's so true, you see, because, oh, yeah, you fix that now that it's broken and it's causing a lot of problems. If you fix it, yay, that was excellent. We love you. But why not being preventive and just reactive, right? And that's how it should be. And I mean, of course, I have seen those things happen, but I never thought about it this way. It's really clever what you're saying because it's true. In every organization that I have worked, I see the same pattern. Is oh yeah, I fix something that is broken, but never I'm gonna do data quality before until it's too late, or get a promotion or something. Just put a patch, as you said.
Yeah, Pat. It's interesting. The first big problem I worked on, I was at Bell Labs and supporting AT&T, and the guy who hired us said, "Well, 3 years ago, I got a big bonus for correcting the problem, and 2 years ago, I got a big bonus for correcting the problem, and last year I got an even bigger bonus. I bought a Lexus with it. I mean, it was very specific about his Lexus, kind of thing for this bonus." He said, "But somehow I'm noticing a pattern and it doesn't seem right for the company. Can we do anything about that?" And so this was something I hadn't added to, the earlier, but the reward mechanisms reward the cosmetic, right? Put a band-aid on it, things right now.
Yeah, I think this is also coming some way, somehow, not entirely, but from software engineering, right? That you also have like the QA that the developers will do somewhat okay job, but then you have this group of QA people who will fix their problems because they didn't want to take care of it. And then if something wrong in production, there is always a quick fix and that's it. But unfortunately, we don't have this data. I mean, not all the organizations have a data quality engineer to work on those topics. So the data engineer will do something somewhat okay, and then you have the fix again, and then it's this cycle of I do the minimum just to have the Jira ticket completed, and then when it's needed to be fixed, it gets fixed, and that's it.
Right. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's getting the organizational stuff right. Okay. And preventing errors like we're talking about, it is way easier and it is way more fun than what organizations do today. I mean, there's this line that goes, data quality is not sexy, so it doesn't attract attention. And my response to that is, if you don't find data quality sexy, you're not doing it right, right? Because if you're doing it right, you're figuring out what's most important to customers, and you're figuring out where errors are coming from, and you're teaming up with others to make those things, the root causes those errors go away and make things better, and setting your customers up, to do more, right? I mean, that is a terrific job. Now, I agree. If your job is to clean up other people's crap, that's not sexy at all. But it really underscores my point. If that's what you're doing, you shouldn't find it sexy, and you're not doing it.
Yeah, no, completely agree. But let's bring actually a topic that I wanted to touch with you that we talked a couple of weeks ago in the call that we had, the product thinking in analytics, right? When we talk about data products, we talk about the definitions the other day and the people is usually quite confused, but product thinking also includes data quality, right? So who is this for? What decisions does it support? What outcome to change, how we can do it better. From your perspective, how does product thinking change the way analytics and report are designed like today? How this might benefit now that that we talk about it, right? And besides the buzzword, right, of data products.
So look, I mean, I've been hearing a lot about data products for a couple of years,
Mhm.
and here's what I think is fundamental, right? What I think is fundamental is the notion of a customer, right? And I think it is fundamental of the notion that the customer has a problem to solve or a task to do, and they need data to do it. right? And I think it is fundamental that, sorting out what data they need and then getting good, solid sources of that data is fundamental. Okay. I think that what is implied there is some in our business are talking about shift left. And I think that thinking, we talked about that earlier, the shift starts by going right. The shift starts by understanding who the customer is and what the customer needs, and so forth. And it doesn't make sense to shift left until you understand that and narrowly focus on the best data possible for those customers, specific needs of specific customers, right? And I don't want to, beat on shift left, but lots of data is coming in and nobody ever uses it. And if nobody ever uses its quality doesn't matter, kind of thing. Now, to me, the this business of going out there and talking to customers and talking to sources and sorting out root causes and so forth, it's hard for a lot of people with data in their title, right? They're not trained that way. They don't think that way. They may be, they may not be outgoing enough, to engage that way. But all the product managers I know, right? They're outgoing, they're chatty, they have friends over here, they have, things over there. They're very good at making connections, right? They're very disciplined at understanding, we're going to make some choices here and so forth. So when your specific question was, what do I think about the product mindset? But it was less to me about the product mindset and more about the product manager mindset, right? So this quality happens through people, and I have observed for the past couple of years that telling data people that they need to be product managers doesn't work, right? You're shaking your head. I mean, you've seen the whole thing, and I hate to be crass about it, but we need different people, doing those jobs, and product managers have a skill set that would just be outstanding in this respect.
I completely agree. We talked about it last time, and I was with the right people in these data teams embedded, we can go far. Again, using the perspective from software engineering, where we have a whole team shaping and creating a product until it's done, and you put the customer first, right? All the time. This is what we need in data. But I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of these product managers are quite scared of the data world because they think we're going to shoot them all the SQL and Python and AI models. So they are afraid to even start a career like that. I had spoken with quite a lot of them. And they're like, hey, Amy, how can I switch to data product manager? And I was like, honestly, you already have the skills. It's pretty much the same thing, right? If you know a little bit of SQL or if you know Python, I mean, it's not going to harm you, but it's not like you need it to do your day to day, because what you need to do is talk to people, gather the right requirements, understand the problems, and try to solve.
I think there's a really big deal in that. So one time wrote a little article on pizza diplomacy. And, the idea is, well, how are you going to get two groups to, start talking? Well, right, for data managers, agonize over that. But a product manager says, I know, let's go have pizza. I'll pay, kind of thing, right? And, just move the setting to one that is been contentious and hasn't worked in the past, to one that is more conversational and some, hey Amy, tell me about your family a little bit, right? And what do you struggle? Oh yeah, I'm struggling with that too. Yeah, those teenagers, they don't listen. Anyway, I think this is really a big deal, right? There are technical aspects of work in data, but we can't substitute the real work of communications and getting the organizational stuff right. There is no SQL that will make somebody understand what it means to be a good customer.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, it was quite interesting for me because the ex-boyfriend of a friend of mine, he's a SAP developer. in X company. And because now, of course, everything is being replaced by AI. It's another topic we'll probably touch a little bit more. The product managers got fired, right? Because they think that AI can do a lot of the Jira tickets, product management, and so on. And because he was the tech lead, you're the new product manager of the team because not everything is done with AI. And he was telling my friend that he felt it completely uncomfortable because he doesn't want to do the job. He just wants to code and do his tech stuff and not go and talk to business and do this and do Jira tickets and do administrative stuff because this is not what he was looking for. And this is what happens most of the times, right? As you said, tech people is more shy. They want to do their code, they want to do their thing, but they don't want to go and have these long conversations with the business people. But a product manager, as you said, at least I see it from the data product management perspective. They're rich, right? Because they might be able to talk to the data people as well, but also with the business and create this communication in between them without being annoying for each of the parts. Because also I have heard the business people complaining, you could never have a conversation because they start talking about algorithms and this and this and this and that. So, yeah.
Right. I mean, look, the good news is there's this big middle ground if you seek to find it. Okay. And I don't know. Look, I was not trained as a marketing person, and I've had some impact on marketing. I wasn't trained in finance, and I've had some, impact on the way trade operations, work. I wasn't trained as, as a petroleum engineer, and I've had some impact on the way people in oil companies think about data. Right? And there's this big middle ground kind of thing, and if you go into it with an open mind, and that doesn't mean that you don't run into jerks, right? That's something we all run into jerks, and I don't know, I'm a jerk at times too, but so it's not like this is a silver bullet. It's hard, and you have to learn as you go, and you have to learn new languages as you go, and also a lot of business people. I mean, they're stuck in the 1980s as well, kind of thing, right? And part of your job is to ask questions, and you've done a good job if they scratch their head and go, I never thought about that, kind of thing. I mean, then you got something that can really cause something big and exciting to happen.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree on that. But going back to the delivering a data product, for example, I see a lot of struggle. Again, what you mentioned at the very beginning is delivering data versus delivering value. How can you show value out of your dashboards, your data products? What's the best way to um, show the ROI, let's say, to the C levels and impulse more data initiatives coming?
That's a really interesting question, right? And what I've found is that you can feel within 2 or 3 months whether something's going to work and work in a big way or not, right? You can feel the change of energy around people, right? You can feel, right? So I mean, it usually starts out and says, okay, what problem are we trying to solve? And nobody knows the answer to what problem we're trying to solve. And then there's a lot of give and take. Well, are we trying to do this? Are we trying to demonstrate value to the business? But usually, like, it's going to take off. It has a chance when people go, here's a problem, right? This is a problem that we all care about, right? And we've never been able to deal with this problem before. Here's a way we may be able to deal with this problem. Here's a new analytic technique that may help us look at it in a new way. Here's something in data quality that enables us to look in a right way. Here's a new way we're going to organize. We're going to move people around. Here's the new way we're going to do business. And business benefit is a lagging indicator, right? Culture change is a lagging indicator, right? Okay. If you're doing data quality the first the first thing that you see is there is a spring in people's step as they start to think about something new, right? The next thing that you see is they've narrowed the focus and they picked some simple problem and they've solved. Okay. And they've solved it working together and you just smiled. So I know, you resonate with this, right? And it's, okay, yeah, this new way of working together works. Or maybe it's a new measure, okay, kind of thing. For me personally, when people call me up 5 years later and they say, Tom, you really changed this organization. The first thing they say, the most common thing they say is you change the way we thought about customers. Okay. They are not the enemy. They are not beasts. They are, human beings just like us. Kind of, and you can feel it very, very soon. Okay. And in terms of gaining senior management support, well, more people throw their hat in, right? People begin to get into senior management. It gives them the options. Okay, well, there's a lot of energy here. I can help. Okay, I can help. I can help by solving problems, or I can do this, or I can do that, or I can give them the right resources. I can make the connections. Whatever it is. Okay, and I don't know. I don't want to put a hard time frame on it, but if you don't see that in the first, 3 or 4 or 5 months, then you've probably not got the problem right. You've not articulated it right. You've not expressed the direction that people can get behind, or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's why there is in a lot of organizations, I see a lot of these dashboard cemeteries, like a lot of things that that was used maybe a few times, but then it lost momentum. But and you forget about it, and it's just there, like occupying a space, and of course, computing and cloud space and so on. Because at the end, you don't really build it for the people, right? You build it for maybe a little bit of background there, but not for the people, not to be used, not to be. That's why I believe in metrics to measure the data products usage, for example, with like MPS, simple things like, are you using it? Do you find it useful? What can be, improved? And go to the users and ask them, okay, is this what you're looking for? And try to fix it, because otherwise you won't know that there needs to be a feedback loop. When you deploy a new, let's say, dashboard or whatever you are giving.
Yeah, there's a real big that feedback loop. That word, you just said. I mean, communications channels. Talk about. There's what do we need? There's measurements. There's feedback. Right, building those communications channels is absolutely essential. And one of my first experiences, I was advising a market research group, and they complained that they never had any chance to do any market research because they created 160 reports every week. So, kind of things. Okay, great. Well, how many of them do people actually read? And so, well, we don't know. And so, well, okay, well, how do you know whether you're doing any good? So, well, if we weren't doing any good, we'd be getting yelled at, kind of things. Okay. You're complaining about productivities, but it went back and forth for 2 or 3 weeks. And then finally I got them, together in a room. And then one day we put, we put the wall, the whiteboard, and on the whiteboard we put, things we're afraid to stop and things we'll try stopping. And we got to 80 each. And I said, okay, well, next week, don't send out 80 reports. See what happens. Okay. And you know what happened? Nothing. What? Right? And so, a couple of weeks later, well, let's repeat this experiment. So now let's not send out 40 reports. And kind of things. Okay, well, we send out 40 reports. And this time there was one complaint. Okay. One complaint. So we put that complaint back in, but they went from 160 reports to 41. Right? They increased their amount of time they could do actual research by a factor of 3. And all they did was put in that simple feedback loop, right? That, that you mentioned just a minute ago. And of course, I encourage them to go more. I mean, that's not enough, right? But just from the standpoint of the original problem, we need to, make more time to do market research. The answer was not go get more money, not get better people or anything like that. Is quit doing work that nobody cares about.
That's human-centered design, right? At the end, is data designed to be used by a human, and we don't have that usually in the data space, unfortunately. But I do believe, because I have seen it, as you said, like just these feedback loops, these conversations, these little incentives. For example, at some point, I was implementing a data catalog, and no one wanted to write the definition of the metrics, because we need to, I mean, we have like 5 definitions of revenue, 5 of leads, and everything was different for each team. And we needed to involve product to kind of harmonize those metrics and create the real definitions, right? Or if we have, I don't know, returns, revenue, which is revenue plus returns or less returns, we should make it specific, right? And written somewhere. At the beginning, the people was not really engaged. And of course, it was a little bit of push and pull, go to the CPO, try to escalate a little bit. But at the end, I created like some gamification with a data catalog. So every 4 months, there was a ranking. So the team that will insert the most definitions, the team that will catch the most bugs, I don't know, things like that. And then they will get like a pizza party, which is something really silly, right? It's just a pizza party and some swags from data catalog people. I asked like for some hats, some pens and cups. And they were like super happy because they felt it was like a competition and, oh no, mine is better and this and this and that. And they started to talk and to understand each other and become friends. Was it easy to achieve that? No. It took a lot of time, a lot of escalations, but it's possible. It's possible.
So, by the way, I mean, I really want to, yeah, I want to, key on this. I mean, because a lot of people want to say, people are the problem. Okay. And I take major offense at that statement. Right? I mean, I find almost everybody I've dealt with over, my career, people are amazing, right? They go to great lengths to get the job done. Often they are given, they're not given the tools they need. They're not given the context they need, to do their job. But turn them loose, help them understand, who their customers are, help them connect with their customers, help them connect with data sources, and put them in a position where organizational barriers are not getting in the way. And they do amazing things. Okay. And we're not going to solve this data quality problem without getting large numbers of people engaged in all this, customers, creators, prevention, kind of thing, that quite frankly we're really lucky they enjoy so much.
Yeah. I have another example as well. Something about data quality, actually, that is, for me, was like very happy when we made this. I was doing data product management in that time, and we were doing some platform migration from premises to the cloud. And we had to work, the first use case was with the monetization team. And we were asking for data quality, not only technically speaking, but I was asking for, from the business perspective, I would like to know deviations, patterns that you have seen, things that we can test, in more business driven way. So we not only do the basic data quality stuff. And they were like, we don't have time for that, blah, 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 blah. And they were the first ones always complaining about data quality, right? But they didn't want to provide it. So we had to escalate the situation again. And they were like, okay, we're going to give you something. And when we started to migrate, we started to involve them as well in the conversations. Okay, look, how do you want this metric model? Does it work if it's like this? Shall we do something like that? And they were like providing these. The moment they had a metric that was harmonized, that was not drifting in different reports everywhere with different numbers, they were super happy. And then they were the ones calling out like, hi, Amy, I think we need to be in this meeting because we would like to give you some use cases and this and this and this and that. And I was like, okay, sure. And they were the ones actually feeling like the happiness of joining these meetings, seeing the data good. And this company had 4 verticals with different data teams. So it was huge. And at some point, the other monetization manager came to me because I was organizing some conferences in this company as well. And he was like, Amy, I want what the other team has because they say they don't have bugs and they don't have like problems with the metrics. How can we achieve that? And I'm like, just let's have a talk and we can also bring whatever we are doing. They were in a different platform because there was a merger, but we could also that make that happen for them. And it was nice that actually the people was trying to also get what the others, were getting good data quality, improve and also collaborate. But again, this is with talk, right? And putting the people first.
Right. Right. And people are amazing. Give them a chance and good things happen.
Yeah, completely. And you have always, you most of the times, you always said, right, that data quality is not a technical issue, but it's a people problem. And I assume this comes from this logic as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't mean to put too hard an edge on it, but it's not a people problem, right? I mean, it's people are the solution runs through people. I do sometimes say there's an organizational problem, right? So silos can make it worse, make it harder to connect customers and create, right? And there can be problems there, and there can be misaligned incentives. But I don't know. It's ever since I started working with them, I just like wanted to get as many people on board as I can.
Yeah, yeah. Um, how do you see the roles, the incentives, and the accountability shaping these data quality outcomes? How do you link them together?
How do I see the roles?
Yeah. Do you think that there is the ownership, for example, of the data quality? Who owns that? How can you incentivize teams? What kind of accountability the teams should have?
So you might be able to get me on a soapbox on this one, Amy. Look. I mean, the two most important roles in all of data, right? And it doesn't have anything to do with quality, catalogs, anything in and around the data space. The two most important roles are the data customer and the data creator. Okay, and I want to be clear. I didn't use the word consumer, right? Data is not consumed when it's used. It is a misnomer. We in the data space want everyone to be precise, and then we use this completely incorrect word when it comes to data. But ultimately, what we do is driven by the satisfaction, the business benefit, the innovations, the good things that come in the customers in the customers, and they are most important. Okay, and then the second thing that's most important is the data creators, right? And because you want to create data that meets those customer needs without going through all kinds of rework and humans in the loop and hidden data factories and all those kinds of things. And at the end of the day, the data is as created, that's as good as it's going to be for the customer. Okay, and so look, these two roles are most important, and everybody is in them, often simultaneously every day, right? And every other role we have, every other chief data officer or data steward or this or that, is only there to make people effective in those roles. Okay, in my view, and if you don't do those things, then you don't get high quality data. You don't get people who are being effective with this stuff. You don't get the business benefits. I mean, so far, this is the only thing that works. And I don't know, practically everything that I read, completely misses these roles. So, I don't mean to pick on data governance, but um, but on the other hand, they'll talk about a consumer, but there are no consumers because data doesn't get consumed, right? And they miss these roles, and these are hard roles, right? I mean, so there is nothing. What I just talked about, I mean, it's way easier, to do something soft in the background and not, the hard people and organizational changes you need to make these things happen. But so far, it's the only thing that works.
Yeah, no, I see it as well, but I see also a lot that no one wants to be responsible of the data quality. So how how do you appoint the right person to do that, right? If you want to give an advice to an organization, okay, who needs to own these data quality? What will be the best option?
Well, so look, the best option is somebody who wants to do it. You may have seen in my stuff earlier, I talk about provocateurs, right? It's the people who will step up to these challenges. And I think you're really talking about, who is the person that is going to hold, right, customers and creators accountable, that's going to train them, and their role is going to help them connect and so forth. And so, but I mean, look, the proximate person is usually the chief data officer, right? And depending on how high the chief data officer reports, but this is a fundamental shift in roles and responsibilities. I mean, ultimately, whoever is on top of an organization is responsible for the management structure and the management system. And so if you're doing this at a team level, then it's the team leader. And if you're doing it at a division level, it's the division leader. And if you're doing it to the whole company, right, that and then it's the CEO, right, who
Mm.
who must be providing, real support, and not just sort of, okay, this is the way we're going to do business. It represents a change, right? The face of this program may be the CDO, the chief data officer, but the real leader is whoever that highest business person putting real effort into the program. Okay.
Mm. Let's zoom in a little bit. If we have one dashboard, let's say, right, who owns the quality of that dashboard, and who owns the responsibility to talk with the requester and the creator to make sure that that new product or new dashboard has the right quality? And then the maintenance, right? Because it's not only quality today, it's data quality for the future.
Look, I tend to, I mean, specifically with AI too, I think it's the person who's responsible on an ongoing basis, right? Not just the developer. It's the person who's responsible on an ongoing basis, who's got to bear that principal responsibility for quality. I think the first thing that we want to do when we start out with a dashboard is, do we need a dashboard? Right? And a lot of times, as we talked earlier, the answer is no, we don't need a dashboard. What we need is a high powered, I use the analogy of a rifle. We need a high powered solution to a very, very focused problem. All right. And the person who is responsible on an ongoing basis for that, is responsible for developing that thing. Right now, if in the process of doing that, you find out, no, there's not one problem. There's, hundreds of them, kind of the same form. And so we're going to build a dashboard. Then, it's the same logic. I want to say one other thing about dashboards, and most of them are way too narrow. Right. And you remember for your balanced scorecard, right? You want to start with customers and customer satisfaction. You want to include employees and employee satisfaction. You want to include a segment on business results, kind of thing, and then you want to, and there's a segment on, are you being a good corporate citizen? So, following the law, and those kinds of things. So, I haven't seen a dashboard that worried about employee satisfaction. I don't see too many of them that do a very good job on customer satisfaction. I see many of them that sort of ossify into things that may have been helpful in getting started, but didn't adjust with the times.
But before we wrap up, I have two closing questions for you. So, first, what's one thing organizations should stop doing if they want their data to actually improve decision making?
What's one thing that they should stop doing?
Yeah.
If well, they should stop pretending that there is one solution, right? You know, if you want better decision making, then you have to teach people to be better decision makers. One thing that's not come up is, you know, we all talk about decision making, but you know, do you see the scorecard on decision making? Do you see, you know, just see, okay, we made 100 important decisions as an organization last year. Which of those worked out best? Which worked out, you know, not best? You know, there's a lot to making good decisions, and we have focused attention, you know, too much on hard data and not enough on all the things around decision making, and certainly not enough around results. And so I'd like to stop them, you know, organizations to quit taking that narrow focus.
Thank you. And the second one, what's one belief about data quality that sounds reasonable, but is actively holding teams back?
Okay, that's yeah. So in and around um, observability, all right. You know, the typical data set is loaded with errors, and many of them can be discovered with business rules, but many of them cannot be. Okay. So, an observability tool is kind of a lightweight look at data, you know, sort of as it moves from one part of the organization to the other. But it does not mate strongly up with what customers really need, and ensure that they get that right. We need way more power than we have in observability.
Yeah, I agree because I see, like DBT, for example, has this observability or Monte Carlo or this or that, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so much more in terms of data quality that just those metrics, let's say it that way, or indicators that they show there.
Yeah. And in some respects, I don't want to say they're not useful, right? You know, because figuring out there was a format change in something, you know, early, and okay, well, you know, that's useful, but I don't know. It seemed like there'd be other ways of doing that that would be, you know, simpler. I mean, again, I think the main thing is the really important things in all of data. So, you know, quality, dashboards, catalogs, dictionaries. They're they're human, and 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 we can use tools to speed it up, but we can't use tools to replace, you know, the essential roles of humans. So far, anyway. Okay. Um, Now, people have been telling me I'm wrong about this for a very long time, and you know, maybe someday I will be. But the stuff that we observe works, right? You know, is very human and management centric.
I'm 100% with you on this. As you said, maybe someday, but definitely not yet. We still need a lot of human intervention and human in the loop in general, especially with the AI topics that people think that they can replace everyone just with one LLM, which is not true. But that's another topic for another day. Tom, thank you very much. This conversation really reinforces something fundamental. Data doesn't create value on its own. People do. And data products only work when they are designed for how people actually think, decide, act, and what they need the dashboard or whatever you're building for. So you've been listening to Data Reality Check, where data meets the real world. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch up next time with more real talk for the front lines of data and AI. Stay data driven. Thanks, Tom.
Yep. Thank you.